All right, so we developed something called the Kiosk app for our Chromebooks, and that basically is a way to keep things confined to a single area that locks things down. It doesn't work as like Respondus does, although it's a similar idea where you keep users from opening new tabs or going out on the internet during an assessment. So that's what a Kiosk app is. It's a way to basically restrict users to a single thing on a Chromebook and not let them go outside of that. That includes new windows, new tabs, and then any other applications. The thing to know about a Kiosk app too is that the user isn't actually using Chrome under their user account. And I'll show you that in a minute. That's important if you have kids who maybe use something for accommodations that's an extension that may have been added to Chrome. None of that will be available for students if they're in a Kiosk app. So what does it look like? When you've added Kiosk apps into your Chromebook devices, before users log in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see something called Apps. And that brings up a list of any Kiosk applications that have been made available for those devices. So in this case, you'll see our CCSD iReady Kiosk app. That's one that we published internally, along with Accelerated Reader. That's another one that we just have available for our domain. That's mostly for younger students. Sometimes they need to just get in to do those things and not worry about logging into the Chromebook and then trying to find the application. This really streamlines that process for them. You'll also see TestNav here. That's what we use for Park. And if you're a Smarter Balance state, you'll probably have used something similar, if not exactly TestNav. Same idea. It really confines the user just to that testing environment. And then also you see our Schoology Kiosk app here. So when you launch a Schoology Kiosk app, it basically takes over the entire screen while it launches the application. And then when it finishes loading, what you see is a login page to Schoology.com. So a user would log in here with their name or password. And if you're using single sign-on, they would have to use the SSO login area here to get to your login page. But the thing you'll notice about this window is that there's no URL bar, and it doesn't appear to have tabs like a normal Chrome browser screen would have. This is just a single window. It does have navigation in the upper left-hand corner. You'll see forward and back buttons. We also have enabled a home button that would take you back to Schoology.com. We also have a refresh button, and that's pretty important for assessments. We've had a lot of situations where a teacher may have forgotten to maybe make a test available for students, so they had to go in and change some settings, or maybe they discovered there was a question they have to fix. We need to be able to give kids the ability to refresh that content on their screens. So we made that available, and then we made the log off option available so that when kids are done using Schoology, they click log off and it takes them right back to the login screen on the Chromebook. If you're in an assessment, and that's what the example is that we have here, you'll notice that this looks basically like a Schoology test environment. The difference, again, is there is no URL bar. So there's no new tabs. You'll notice there are no extensions. There's no bookmarks at the top. Users can't take screenshots because that requires the use of another app. And remember, if you're using a Kiosk app, you're really locked into just that one until you end the session. So this keeps the user completely confined just within the Schoology environment. So what do you need if you want to deploy something like this if you've got managed Chromebooks? You need access to your Chrome Management Console for your domain, because that's where you actually add the Kiosk app. And then this is assuming that you already have the information or you already have the app available. This doesn't tell you about how to create your own. But if you've created your own, you would have that listed in your domain apps area. If it's unlisted, you need to know what the URL or link is and the ID, or it may be one that's publicly available inside the Chrome Web Store. You have to be careful though, because not all Chrome apps are Kiosk apps. It requires some kind of special things to make those things, make them function properly. So just make sure that if you're adding a Kiosk app, it really is designed to do just that. And then we'd also recommend that you first test this out on maybe a set of Chromebooks you have in a specific OU, and that way you can make sure that it works the way you want it to before you deploy it to your entire domain or on a wider scale. So how do you set this up then for Chromebooks? As I said earlier, you have to have access to the management console, and so your domain admins for your Chrome management part will go to admin.google.com. to access the area where they add these apps. And then, as I said earlier as well, you need to have the information if this is not one that you've created or is publicly available in the Chrome Web Store. So the one that I showed earlier that took you just to the Schoology login page, that's kind of a generic Schoology kiosk app because it isn't designed for a custom domain or single sign-on. And so I have the ID here, and then I have the URL here, and I would need both of those things to set that up. So in the admin console, when you go into Chrome management, most things happen in Chrome under user settings, but not kiosk apps. Kiosk apps actually happen in the device settings. So when I click on device settings, it's going to bring me to an area where I can choose our organizational units on the left-hand side. And that's something you want to be careful about too. We've had a lot of people who have said that, well, mine didn't show up or I wasn't able to find it. Usually it's because they haven't added it to the right spot where the devices live. In our case, we're just going to go down to one of our test OUs, which is our information systems area. And once I get in there, I need to scroll down to our kiosk settings area. And there's a public session kiosk option, and that actually isn't what we're talking about today. Those can be really handy, but for something else. We're actually going to look at the kiosk apps here. And you can see that I already have 3 that have been added for this particular OU. So when I click on Manage Kiosk Applications, I see the 3 that are already installed, our CCSD iReady, TestNav for Park, and then Accelerated Reader. And then I need to actually specify a custom app because the one I'm adding maybe isn't in my domain app list and it isn't publicly available in the web store. So when I click on Specify Custom App, it asks me for these 2 things, the ID and the URL. Well, I happen to have those things listed right here. So I'm going to grab the ID, which is just a random of gobbledygook. Paste that into the ID field here. And then also grab the URL. And you'll notice that this string of characters is also part of the URL. This is basically a direct link to the Chrome Web Store. It just happens to be an unpublished link. So I'm going to copy that, paste it into my URL field. And then once I do that and click Add, it's going to then show up over on the right-hand side as another option for those Chromebooks. So I have to click Save here. And then I have to click Save again. And then the next time I boot up any device that is inside of this organizational unit here, the Schoology kiosk app will now be an option. All right, so other things to keep in mind. When you're thinking about using kiosk apps, remember that your users are really confined to one single application. And that means that they can't go outside of Schoology. So if you've added maybe some things where you need kids to go to an outside website, maybe you've got YouTube clips, you have to make sure all that stuff is embedded and available inside the Schoology environment because kids won't be able to go there. They are locked inside of Schoology. And also, as I mentioned earlier, if you have any extensions or things that kids typically use, we use the read-write extension a lot so the kids can listen to things being read out loud to them. If you're in a kiosk app, none of the extensions are available because you're not actually in the user's browser. You're in a kind of a distinct and separate window. And then finally, if you have single sign-on or you have a custom domain that you use for Schoology, you can create your own app, and we'll have another set of instructions on how that works. But for the meantime, if you do have single sign-on, you'd have to make sure you let people know to click the SSO login when they get to that login page that we had made available in our generic login in our Schoology app. So until Respondus is available for Chromebooks, a kiosk app is probably your best bet. If you have any questions about how that might work, feel free to connect with me on Schoology, or you can shoot me an email.